Okay, we're mad at each other, but we're going to do a podcast on Valentine's Day, darn it.
This is not Valentine's Day. This is like January.
But this will go out around Valentine's Day.
Well, what are we going to do for podcasts between now and then if we're doing a Valentine's Day? What?
Mad podcasts.
We need to post some of the podcasts on stuff that we don't agree on, because it just sounds like we're like this homogenous blob of like, I don't know, like the Borg or something.
You know what I say to that?
Real life for real families. Hurts, habits, and hangups happen in every family.
Jerry and I are here with tools to help you trust God, clean house, and tell the truth to ramp up the joy in your family.
You have what it takes.
It's time to become sober on purpose
For his purpose.
Hey, I want to read you something. You ready to listen?
Yeah, sure.
I can't find it. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. Where do you think that fits in the Hollywood Hallmark Valentine's Day?
Spider-Man said that, I think. I saw that in the Spider-Man movie.
Is that the Spider-Man PlayStation you've been working on all
No,
week?
it was on one of the mega movies that I saw, I think.
Today we want to talk about real love, tough love, hard love, love that has nothing to do with ribbons and bows and chocolates.
Go ahead. Set some ground rules.
So here's basically what that verse is saying. Love calls you to listen to what your mate is saying and hoping for. Love calls you to remember the things that are unique in your relationship and pleasures and enjoyments that bring a smile to the other's face. Love calls you to give when it would be a lot more convenient to wait. And love calls you to daydream about those opportunities so regularly that their desires become yours.
I have no experience on this, so... What are you looking at me for?
Well, you're going to chime in or not?
One of the first things I thought of when you started reading that's Corinthians, right?
Yeah, 1 Corinthians 13.
So one of the first things I thought of when you started reading that was the first time I read that, the word was not love, it was charity. And it was years and years later, after reading newer translations, that I saw an old, I think it was King James, where where it's called charity, and it made an awful lot of sense to me that the translation in the Old English would be charity, because charity, I think, in the modern sense, can have a negative connotation, because it almost sounds like somebody is the person receiving charity is oppressed or something. But in my understanding of charity, it's a very righteous and noble thing. It really made a lot of sense to me to think about charity does not envy. Charity does not keep a record of wrongs and the other examples in there. And that I like using the word charity in exchange in that in those verses.
No, that's not what I'm thinking about. It could go that way, because the way Corinthians 13 was explained to me, we use it as the love chapter for weddings, for all those types of things, and we take it a little bit out of context in that this is a love. We use it as a love between a man and a woman, but really it's the love of God between us and him, which marriage is often a symbol or the closest we get to that kind of relationship of a relationship between us and God. But what I get so frustrated about with Valentine's Day and Hallmark movies and all those things is this idea that it all needs to look pretty and be fenced in and show up at the right time and have the right suit on.
Yeah, I broke you of that long ago.
and it doesn't. And some of the deepest loves, the deepest acts of love have nothing to do with this pretty bow box. It's all together.
Can we go backward though? And if you don't agree with the charity word and you think that it gives different meaning, how is charity different from love?
I think love is more expansive because you have phileo love, agape love, and then I forget the last one.
Eros.
Love, brotherly love. Because
Well, no.
the Greeks and the Jews had multiple words for this.
Right.
And this kind of love, we're talking about the all-encompassing, unconditional love.
So what does agape mean? Because we're talking about agape love.
Unconditional love.
Well, that's not my understanding. My understanding is agape means willing to die for.
I'll look it up. I don't think it means that. It means
yeah. So just to define, eros is sexual love. Phileos, where we get Philadelphia, or the city of brotherly love, is like family love. So obviously not sexual. Hopefully not sexual. And then agape, which is a love that transcends those, and that's my understanding, is like a willingness to sacrifice your own well-being or your own carnal desires for something else. So as Tanya does her web search here, I'll keep talking on this because I just remember a sermon that I sat through on this topic, where we get these three different loves translated, where at least I recognize them, is in where is it? I guess it's probably in more than one book, but it's got to be in Luke at least, where Jesus is talking to Peter and he says, Peter, do you love me? And Peter says, well, of course. Well, I believe the first love he used in that was eros.
No, phileos, love.
But he says it three. He says it 3 times.
Yeah. So you know what? You're all right. Charity was one of the words that they used for love. As we got deeper translations, we went to the eros, which is what we see in the media now, is all this sexual romantic love, but not the phileo or the agape love is hardly ever there. I look at this holiday as something where we skip over what the true love of a long-term marriage that overcomes issues is. It is the love that sticks around when things hurt. It's the love that sticks around when things are not going well. It's the love that says, I'm willing to sacrifice to be part of this relationship. And that's the thing that I think we miss out there when there's nothing wrong with buying candy, taking somebody out to dinner, any of those things like that. But if that's all it is, it's pretty shallow.
I'm going to just give a little backstory here to kind of give context to what I'm about to talk about. But when I was interviewing for my current position, one of the things that I was told was, that the person who we hire is one where defeat is not an option, or failure is not an option. And I took that to heart, and I was proud of it, because that's one of the things I bring into my career. But one of the things that I really admire about you, Tanya, is you bring that to the marriage, and you've said that many a times when things are tough between us, is you'll say, I don't know exactly your language, but your feeling is, what I'm hearing from you is that failure in this marriage is not an option. And I think for a marriage to be successful, at least in my experience, that has to be what you come to the table with. Quitting on this thing is not an option. Now, there are obviously some examples, I'm sure, where there's physical violence or safety threats, or
desertion.
Yeah, there you go. There's another one. Absolutely. Although I do have a close friend who I talk with on spiritual matters pretty often, and he, his wife left him, and really wronged him. From obviously there's probably 3 sides to this story, but from what I hear, really wronged him. But in his mind, it doesn't mean that he's going to never get remarried or anything. He's always married to her. It doesn't mean he won't have romantic relationships or even seek a full spiritual commitment. But one of the things I posed to him was, if you had the opportunity to take this woman back, and if she was able to change her mind, would you do it? The short story is, he said, I would. And I think it was a healthy and calculated choice rather than just a passionate choice,
And that's what we see all around us, and that's what we're growing up with for our boys, is this passionate choice. Is if it doesn't feel right, or I don't agree with you, then I'm going to step away. And I don't think I have it any more than you do. We wouldn't be here if you didn't have that will to fight. You fought really hard for your sobriety, and then you fought super hard to stay in this marriage. You were not walking away.
You know, one of the things I heard Dr. James Dobson say years ago, and I don't think it really does a great justice to it, but I think the idea is there. He said, marriage is not about happiness, it's about holiness.
And I think that's really important. There's a couple good books on that. I'll try and find the links for them. Of one of the things is, how do you make your partner better? How do you make your partner more holy? It's not that you can make them more holy, but how do you go in that direction rather than tearing them down? And it was a tape that we listened to with the kids a while ago about, what are you carrying in your backpack? Every time you sit down with your spouse, are you unloading and dumping garbage out there? Are you saying, I really like the way that you have made us a home, or I really like the way that you provide for the family? Are you acknowledging those simple everyday things? That's where that rider of contempt can really break down the love relationship, is when those expectations, which we've talked about in an earlier episode, and the idea of contempt pop in there and say, but you should. And that's, I think, what we see in kind of the Hollywood Hallmark realm is, well, they should know this. They should know that I like this, and they should take care of this, and they should. That just becomes an ugly mess. That is not the deep love that Christ left with us.
Yeah, I know, particularly when we were dating, I think, and we were less healthy individuals, there was some of this, well, you should know what I like. And both on, going both ways between.
Right. I've taken milk in my coffee for 18 years, and he still can't remember.
No, I remember. I just can't remember if it's soy or almond or
oat
or hazelnut milk this week.
And I think that's part, the passion is part of it. The passion is part of the dating. The passion is part of life now, too. I want to dare our listeners to do crazy love. The love that doesn't just show up when you feel like it, but the love that's there when you don't feel like it. I think our first experience of that was bringing our first child home.
I've told this story before. I really did think that I knew what it was like to care for someone more than I cared for myself when we got married. But I realized that I didn't until we had Wesley. When we had our first child, I realized that I didn't understand what that was like. It's kind of humbling because it's a vulnerable thing for me to say in front of you, in front of, our 15,000 listeners. But
someday.
But yeah, as time goes on, I care for Tanya more every day, every year. That early on in our relationship, I didn't have that same feeling that I did for my children.
I don't know if it was because we have this fresh, innocent, perfect life. I don't know if it's because we were so afraid of doing things right. I don't know what it was, or if it was just a gift from God, but we both felt it, that when this little person came into our lives, we would have done anything for him. We would have protected him in any way he needed. We would still protect him in any way he needed, except for in the unhelpful help. And we'll talk about that in another episode. But that really brought home for me the love that Christ has for me, why he died for me, why he cared so much to even be on this planet, to make himself small like a baby and be on this planet and be born of a woman. It was really hard to translate that level of love into our marriage. That has been a trick, because I look at this other adult and I think sometimes,
I'm going to kill you. That's what she thinks.
I don't say it anymore. I just look at him. But I think, why don't you know better? Why don't you act better? You're a full adult, whereas we give our children a lot more grace. But in this kind of Valentine's Day realm, we both come from completely different places, and we're trying to make a life together. We're trying to create a narrative together that's different and is a struggle.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I think is not often talked about is the sacrifice that it takes to create a long-term working marriage. Whether you have had addiction issues, whether you have had hurts, habits, or hang-ups or not, it takes a sacrifice to do that. It just doesn't, you just don't fall off a log and make it happen.
So let me ask you, how do you make a marriage last for the rest of your life?
I don't have an answer for that. I have some answers for how we have made it work.
How did we do it?
So far? One of the tricks that we did, especially as we were putting the marriage back together, was we made sure that we were praying together. We might not have had long prayers or difficult prayers, but as we were struggling through stresses, we were praying together, and that has been super helpful.
How can we guarantee that we're going to be married for the rest of our lives?
We can't, because you keep eating Pop-Tarts and Twinkies and cookies.
Those are generic. They're not Pop-Tarts. That's a copyrighted name. But I'm kind of setting up a trap here, because I think if I'm using my program, that's like the number one way I can sabotage the goal, is to focus on the rest of my life. I have no idea what the rest of my life looks like. The only thing I can tell you is that I'm pretty confident we're going to be married through the rest of the day. And we got to take this. We got to take this one day at a time.
Well enough. And that's one of the things we need to bring it back to is, it is one day at a time. And one day it might not be so pleasant, and then the next day it might be pleasant. It's rehearsing those commitments and those vows and making sure that I'm in alignment with God, and that I know. One of the reasons why I kept telling you that we were going to stay married, even when he wasn't so happy about that, was that God told me we were going to stay married. He told me I was going to stay married. And of course, you always have a choice. Jesus is always a gentleman. That I was going to stay married. And that was one of the tough love pieces. That's one of the clearest discernment pieces I've probably ever had in my life. In that even when things were ugly, and that I thought, why can't I just give up? I was just really clear it wasn't available to me. So I was thinking about it today, and one of the things that's in the program that I think has kept us together is humility. We can't come to the table every time and say, I'm right, I'm right, I'm right. That just won't build a relationship. And there's a verse in Ephesians 4 that says, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Paul wasn't writing that. He was writing it to a church. He wasn't writing it to a marriage. But it might as well be the same for a family unit. Are we eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in a bond of peace? And are we willing to be humble, gentle, and patient to do that? And I think we've both had opportunities of where we've had to come back and say, yes, I'm willing to bend. I'm willing to do what needs to be done to make this happen. And I've seen us pull together in ways that without the struggle of overcoming addiction, of overcoming my codependency and anger and depression, we wouldn't have been able to pull together. That would have been our learning experience in pulling together in other ways. Because we've had to walk through that, we can kind of look at some of these other things and say, that's not a big deal.
Yeah, there's a relativity aspect to everything in life. And as you can overcome some major hurdles, this is all scripture, right? I mean, we get tested. We have faith that God's not going to give us anything we can't handle. We handle these things which we thought we couldn't in the past, where we didn't realize we had the strength that we do, or that can be granted to us. And then, some of the more trivial things they seem trivial. I really do like this, and it's a good scripture. Yeah, Paul's writing this to a church, but the church relationship with God is the same relationship we're told to have with husband and wife.
And in 1 Corinthians 13:5, it says, love keeps no record of wrongs. And man, before we worked our programs, before we went to Al-anon and AA and Celebrate Recovery, we kept records of wrongs. We still have some slips in that, but there was a lot of, well, you did this, so I'm going to do that. You did this, so I'm going to do that. So you did this, I'm going to withhold that. That was in finances, that was in social life, that was in even managing the children. We haven't fessed up to the fact that we at sometimes fought each other to get out to the car first with the keys in our hands so the other one would have to take care of the kids. It's not that we didn't like the kids. It's a matter of we wanted our own personal time, and it was something to fight over. It has been pretty extensive with us. And those are the battles that I don't wish on anybody. They're also the things that kept us fighting for our marriage. And Beth Moore talks about it. Beth Moore is a Bible teacher out of Houston, and she talks about instead of fighting each other, fight for your marriage.
That's a noble fight.
And that's picking the right battle. And that's when Paul talks about that love doesn't dishonor others. It doesn't do its own seeking. It's not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrongs. We keep records of wrongs as humans. We have a hard time saying, I am sorry and I want to make an action to fix this. And that's what we don't see, I think, in the Hollywood Valentine's Day love part, is the real marriages, the authentic marriages, have taken those wounds and turned them into beautiful scars.
Although, I know that you have a secret love affair with John Cusack, and
that was only the summer of Cusack, and that's over.
And Say Anything, that is one of the greatest parts in that movie, where he's like, I was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. I don't even remember what it was about, but when he's holding up the boom box playing Peter Gabriel, and yeah, that was a good part. Just say so. There are exceptions to the Hollywood rule, is all I'm saying.
You're just gonna go against it, huh?
There's an exception to the rule. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
That's what made the movie so great, though.
Was the sacrificial love when he gets on the plane to go with. See, we're dating ourselves. What, mid-'80s movie, something like that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was watching it, 10 years after the fact myself, but.
So we're not saying do kind things, do gracious things for your Valentine, for your kids, for other people. It is too bad that the term of love and that the idea of love has been over-sexualized, has been taken out of the context, and the depth and the truth of real love, real married, authentic love, is kind of pushed under the carpet. It's not as flashy, but it sure is something that you can hang on to, that you can count on, that you can believe in. The rough times build in those beautiful scars. So I'm going to leave you with a little bit more to think about when you're talking to your Valentine. I've got a love dare set up on the webpage. It's a 14-day challenge. It's very much like our prayer challenge. A 14-day challenge that gets you to think about all the wonderful things you could do for your mate, for your children, for a close friend. And think about this. Love calls you to listen and see what the other person is hoping for. Love calls you to remember the things that are unique in your relationship, the pleasures and enjoyments that bring a smile to the other's face. Love calls you to give when it would be a lot more convenient to wait. And love calls you to daydream about the opportunities so regularly that their desires become yours as well. And so we leave you with those thoughts and the Love Dare Challenge. Which, are you going to sign up for that?
What is it?
So it's a combination of actions and texts and different thought processes over 14 days. It's super short. You'll get it in your email every day for the 14 days. We're hoping to get people to sign up on the 1st, and it'll be completed on the 14th. And we'd love to hear your comments on the challenge. We'd love to hear your comments on love. And those of you who have had the opportunity to experience this deeper love that can overcome wounds and walk through the fire and still look at each other and say, I love you. Let us know. Let us know about that.
Just do it one day at a time is all I suggest.
Okay, what are you going to do for me for Valentine's Day?
I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do in the challenge.
The challenge, the Crazy Love Dare challenge?
Yeah, you're going to tell me what to do and everybody else, and then I'm going to do it. And
Okay.
And we're going to try and make it spontaneous.
Well, but I just made it simple for you, and you like simple.
I do. I really do.
So now you can just follow the challenge, the Love Dare, and some of them are a little difficult.
Oh. Did I agree to this already?
But it's going to be good.
Okay.
All right. So we'd really like your reviews on iTunes or Stitcher, but iTunes mainly. We're looking for those 30 reviews first quarter, and it's really simple to do. You can do it from your laptop or your iPhone or your regular phone. All you have to do is download iTunes, go just below where they say available episodes on the screen, and there will be the opportunity to review. We love talking to you in the Phileo style love, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye-bye.